Welcome to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, the go-to source for business leaders ready to supercharge company growth. I'm your host, Kerry Curran, and today's episode is Revolutionizing Your Growth Strategy, the Infinite Power of Original Research. We're joined today by Meghan Lavin, B2B marketing expert and VP of marketing at Acceleration. In this episode, we dive into the power of original research as a critical tool for driving business growth. Meghan and I draw from our extensive experience with original research papers, which, while created as valuable tools for our target audience, also provided significant benefits for driving our own business growth. From strengthening relationships, building credibility, to securing press and keynote opportunities, and becoming the foundation for limitless content development, our proven approach can be a game changer for businesses seeking revenue growth. So let's go. And welcome, Meghan. So excited to have you here on the podcast today. Please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and expertise.
Yeah. First off, thank you so much for having me. My name is Meghan Lavin. I'm the VP of Marketing at Acceleration. Acceleration is a data and tech consultancy. We help marketers build the organizational capabilities and technical infrastructure that they need to future-proof their businesses and continue to drive strong marketing performance. We're also a certified Google Marketing Platform reseller, part of Group M. I've been there for about 2 years, looking after the North American marketing as well as our global marketing. But before that, I've been in B2B marketing for almost 10 years now. I've had my hands in everything from webinars to events to rebrands, website launches, white papers and original research, which we've partnered on a lot over the years. And it's been a good experience.
Thank you. And for those who haven't had the benefit of working with you or you and I together, Meghan and I were partners for a very long time, working side by side, both for Catalyst and Group M, and have lots of really strong business successes under our belts. So when I finally convinced Meghan to join the podcast, or I should say squeeze in some time in her busy schedule for me, there were so many topics, Meghan, that we were like, we can talk about this, we can talk about that, we can talk about this. Because as you mentioned, like, we touched everything, and you've been a master in everything. But for today, so we decided we were going to narrow it down to original research as part of a content strategy, and which is, one of our favorite topics. And I always say, like, it's my favorite initiative, and I've had the benefit of really kind of managing or spearheading the initiative almost every year for a long time. And to prove that, Meghan,
show the proof.
I pulled out
Hall
our
of Fame
stack of papers. They're not even all here, but Meghan, these go back to April 2016,
oh my
January
gosh,
2017. But and all the way until the most recent one we did together was it 2022? But there should be a date on this. March of 22.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's such an important part of a content strategy. And I mean, it's just exciting. Even preparing for this conversation, I was like, I need to do another white paper.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, it's funny because I often lead with it, and then I realize people are like, wait, what? Just a research paper? And so from your perspective, just before we kind of dive into how we did it, talk about, like, from your perspective, why it was so important for it to be part of our strategy.
Gosh, a number of reasons. I mean, first, thought leadership, right? I think when you put out original research, you're doing something that's new. You are truly bringing like new insights and new data to the industry that helps you elevate your own business, and it also helps you empower your clients. In our case, that was marketers, right? We were targeting, Fortune 500 senior marketers, and it really enabled us to give them a tool that they could take back to their businesses to guide their investments and strategies. So I think it's super important from a thought leadership perspective. It's important from like a relationship and client empowerment perspective. I think also, and I think we'll probably get into this, but it's a great way to kind of build in a content hub for your brand or agency, right? You're creating so much content when you do original research, and there's a lot of ways that you can slice and dice it to maximize the value that you're getting out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it just continues to kind of expand how and where you're sharing your areas of expertise. I will just give a shout out to our first paper was the Age of Amazon, and if you'd believe it, we published this in 2017, the fall of 2017, and it was actually the first industry research paper focused on Amazon, such to the point where our data was picked up in the New York Times, which I still have a copy of here somewhere. I need to get that framed, but definitely a career highlight to see your data quoted in the New York Times. But one of our kind of strategic approaches, as you pointed out, like finding that data point that's going to be valuable for for our target audience, which for us was marketers, decision makers, buyers who we wanted to hire our agency, which again was why we wanted to promote our thought leadership and intelligence, was demonstrating the gap between, first of all, diving into consumer behavior, and like where, like in this one, it was like we noticed, we'd been reading about the Amazon taking Google market share, which sounds so like remedial now, but anyway, like what we were looking at is consumer behavior and the target audience of our target audience, and how they were engaging with Amazon, and where, when, what categories, and questions about verticals and categories, and research, where they go, Google versus Amazon, which was such a big point back then. And then also surveyed the marketers, the planners on the brand and agency sides who were placing those media dollars. And in this situation, it was like this new emerging advertising giant.
Yeah.
But it was like, how are they managing it?
Yeah. I think too, what was interesting is like getting them to think about those channels as awareness drivers, right? At the time, they were just so much seen as like, last click sales drivers, but we sort of had this like inkling that like, no, they're more than that.
Mm-hmm. No, and you're spot on. And so that we were like, how can we help, as you pointed out before, make this a tool to help marketers with how they're approaching Amazon? And you're right, at the time, a lot of brands had their merchandising team manage Amazon, and it had nothing to do with their digital marketing strategy. So you're right, like helping them. So in that, we kind of, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say too, I mean, like going back to the approach and how we tried to pull out the most valuable insights, we took sort of like a quantitative and a qualitative approach to the research, right? I mean, every year we did it. We had sets of surveys that targeted consumers and marketers to get information from, large groups of consumers and marketers based on, from a consumer perspective, where are they shopping? How are they shopping? Where do they go at different stages in their decision-making and buying journey? And then from a marketer perspective, where are you investing? How do you utilize these channels? And that was great for getting some hard numbers, right? And some really powerful statistics. But I think one of the really great things we did in addition to that was add in a qualitative element. We always
Yes.
made it a huge priority to survey marketing leaders and partners and vendors and clients of ours to add sort of like a human element to the research, right? I think we
Mm-hmm.
always had a really nice balance between highly analytical and like data focused content, but sort of supplemented that with, expert POV from industry leaders.
No, you're right. And that is another thing that really differentiated our data, right? It wasn't just from one perspective, consumers or marketers, but then it was also the qualitative and the quantitative. No, and you're right. And that was in getting those interviews actually added color to the data, which
Yep.
and found that was so valuable.
Yeah.
And so we identified the gaps in consumer and marketer planner behavior and with the qualitative and quantitative data. And that was kind of our model going forward. And we started with Age of Amazon. And then our next one, which I still think was ahead of its time, era of e-commerce, didn't quite get picked up by the New York Times. But I was thinking about it today. So much of that is aligned today, but us, it was like, okay, now we're starting to see Walmart and
Mm-hmm.
Target become players in that space, and in Home Depot. And so, it helped kind of, again, like help us monitor market trends, and bring new insights.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Break Room Labs. Break Room Lab gummies for energy and focus feature an optimized blend of low caffeine, vitamin B12, and nootropics to refresh your mind and body in as little as 5 minutes. Low sugar, tasty, and convenient. Get 20% off when you visit breakroomlabs.com.
Yeah, I would just add that, one of the benefits of us doing this yearly, right? This was something that we did on an annual basis. For a lot of the years, we were also partnered with the same vendor who helped us execute the research, and that enabled us to make some really interesting year over year comparisons, right? We were able to ask the same question each year, compare how things were changing, and call out some really noticeable shifts in how consumers were behaving
Mm-hmm.
and how advertisers were investing. And I think another thing about the approach that in hindsight was really successful was how in the surveys, and I think this was like something you had like flagged and like were, suggested early on, and it's something that was super effective, was making sure that when we did our surveys, we were always asking, what types of items are the consumers were shopping for, right? We could sort of place them
Mm-hmm.
into a category. Were they shopping for home goods? Were they shopping for electronics, right? And then on the advertiser or marketer survey, we did the same thing, right? We asked
Mm-hmm.
what
Right.
industry or sector they were from, and that enabled us to make some really powerful comparisons. I don't remember like the exact stat off the top of my head, but like something that sticks out in my mind is we were able to say something like, 70% of people who are in the market for home improvement items or home furnishings are going to Home Depot, but only 13% of marketers in that space are investing in advertising on homedepot.com. And that's sort of like an
Mm-hmm.
eye opener to marketers and advertisers in that space.
Mm-hmm. No, and those were that's the exact kind of insight that we we wanted to get out of the paper so that we could help marketers get smarter. And that's a good point, because I always wanted my ideal scenario, to your point, was like someone to walk into their CMO's office and saying, "Look at this research. We
Right.
need to be doing this. We need to be approaching it." And it happened a lot where like as a business strategy, it worked. We got a lot of phone
Totally.
calls. We conducted a lot of trainings. We were flown out
Mm-hmm.
somewhere to do trainings, like, and then obviously the the lead gen aspect. So obviously we're obsessed and we love research papers, and but so let's talk about like the process. We talked about our, the kind of the approach for qualitative and quantitative. But, we had to, I guess, some of the getting the research that interviews really required having relationships with a variety of different industry experts.
Yeah.
Which was hard sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, it almost became this cycle for us, right? We would, whether it was like a client or an industry expert or even someone we saw, speaking at a conference on a similar topic, we made it a point to sort of like pause and say, actually this person would have some really good perspective for our paper. And I think we, like, as we were identifying folks to be interviewed, it was always like, we were just trying to pay attention to signals. Are these people who are up and speaking? Do they seem like they're folks who are generous with their knowledge? Do they want to be thought leaders, right? And sort of building relationships with them to get them involved in the paper. And I think, they had a good experience, with their interviews, and it enabled us to then go back and ask for an interview in the next year's paper or invite them to speak at a webinar or join an event, right? Like, we just sort of created this cycle and this stable of thought leaders that were, happy to partner and be featured and who always brought great perspective to the table.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it definitely rounded out the perspectives. And to your point, it wasn't always easy. Like, we often wanted to get the voice of somebody that was an expert at Amazon or Google. And, they had to get approvals, or we had to go through, like, we had the benefit of Group M to help us kind of get our way into some of the partners. And then we often also found that our own clients weren't allowed to participate because it would look like an endorsement and it was against their company policy, or many reasons. And we often did have clients participate, but not always. And so it would be a friend of a friend, the industry partner, the platform partner would say, I can bring this person in. But you're absolutely right that we also went up to people at conferences and, tried to get them to participate.
Hey, it's a great way. Like, if they're up on stage talking, right? Like, they're someone who likes to share their perspective. Maybe they'd be interested in being featured in a paper. And I think at times we got really creative. We also, former employees who went brand side, or, even old clients maybe moved around to a different organization where they had a little bit more flexibility to speak publicly on, their strategies and, their thinking. We went a lot of different routes, and also our own people too, right? It's important to get your perspective out there as well. So we made it a priority to always identify a few internal thought leaders who we wanted to elevate and feature via qualitative interview. So you can't forget about your own people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you and I did this, I didn't count how numerous times. And so we also identified or navigated through some challenges or like best practices. And I'll never forget one of the papers we wrote, and I was doing a press interview, and the reporter asked me, was there anything in the research that surprised you? And it took me a minute because I was like, well, no, because I wrote the thesis. And so therefore and not that I was forcing the answer, but it quickly made us realize for future papers to make sure that as we were, writing the questions for both the qualitative and quantitative surveys and interviews, that we weren't leading the witness. We weren't, and I don't think we were, but I think we made an extra effort to make sure it wasn't a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. Yeah. And over the years, there were times where the research came back and did surprise us, and, oh, that's not what I expected. And right. I think in those situations, though, the paper ends up becoming even stronger. You end up uncovering new angles, things that you weren't
Right.
even expecting and that the industry might not be expecting either. But yeah, I think you have to be careful not to, make it a self-fulfilling prophecy and you have to be open to what the
Right.
numbers and the research is actually saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, I don't remember the exact data point, but I remember being convinced that all marketers were, doing the opposite of what I thought they were doing. And then when they actually, or they were, I thought they were doing the opposite of what they were actually doing. And then I was like, oh shoot, I wanted that to be like an obvious, like that Home Depot example.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And so we're like, okay, but to your point, then we just pivoted
You
the
work with
data.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we they so many questions. They don't all make it into the paper.
Right.
But the other thing too we didn't even mention was that all of that quantitative data gets illustrated in graphs in different ways too, with the comparison side by side of the consumer and the marketer to really accentuate those gaps. And that's where, like, sometimes it was different than we thought it would be. And seeing that illustration, you're like, okay, like this isn't a bad thing. It's just different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've worked with a number of different writers and researchers.
Yeah.
Share some of those experiences.
Yeah. I think over the years.
So we like all of the writers and researchers we've worked with.
Yes. No, I was going to say we've
we just found different best practices.
But I think, finding a researcher, a writer, a vendor who's a good partner and really understands what you're trying to do and understands your business and industry is like absolutely critical. I think it's, certainly something worth vetting ahead of time, right? If you're about to bring someone on to help you do original research, right? Like ask for other writing samples, ask for other research, make sure that they have experience in your industry, especially if it's like super technical or niche and some specialization is required. I think another thing that, we had gotten in the habit of doing was having them write like an abstract at the beginning. We'd sort of brief them on what we were trying to do, our hypothesis, how we sort of envision the paper playing back or, playing out, and then have them come back to us with their version of an abstract and sort of like just sense check to make sure we're all on the same page and they actually get it, and also have like the language and vocabulary to talk about the topic in a sophisticated way.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we found that they needed to have some knowledge of the industry,
Definitely.
vertical, like had to be familiar with search marketing or e-commerce. And the other thing too, one of the partners we worked with was not open to data or insights from other sources. And that's one thing that we actually really liked to include. I think one of our papers, I remember we had relevant stats were out there, eMarketer, Gartner, like we brought that into our paper to add further value to our audience.
Yeah, I think that shows like objectivity and credibility too, right? You're bringing in data from multiple sources. On a like similar note, I'd say too, when you're looking for a researcher or vendor, dig into also their requirements or how they handle the final like output, the design paper. Is there an opportunity for your brand to shine through, or are they going to require that you use their branding and it's in their design? If you want your branding and your sort of identity to, come to the front, you need to make sure that the vendor and partners, have to be comfortable to do that. That's something you can negotiate for.
Definitely. And I think we found, at a high level, the best practices were like having the relationship with those writers and researchers. I know if we asked them, like you and I would get pretty involved because, we had a vision for how we wanted it to be, but we found that our partners were so great that we had a really good back and forth where I'd be like, well, how about this, but I know you're the researcher. And they're like, well, the way we would ask it is this, and this is how we would do it. And,
they have good, really good, like watch outs specifically in terms of how you ask the question, right? Like people may not know that term. What do you actually mean by that? Can you elaborate, right? They help coach you through some of those Some of those things you may not be familiar with if you're not doing research all the time. I think too,
Yeah.
in our situation, we were lucky to find a partner who we worked with multiple years. And I think, in that case, it sort of optimized our process every year because they knew us,
Yes.
because they knew what we did. It was faster, it was better. Like they had the context from the previous years. It made everything
Mhm.
super smooth.
Yeah, no, I agree, and still I'm hoping for the opportunity to work. That was London Research and Linus, and I hope we can work with them. I'm trying to plan to work with them again soon, but so wanted to give Linus a shout out. But the other thing too is that how the types of questions. So for the quantitative data, sometimes it would be multiple choice, sometimes it would be a scale. Sometimes it would be likely, not likely, that kind of scale. Sometimes it was like 3 times a week, once a month, like dates, times. There's probably real research terms for all of these, but first of all, we would always we're not going in any sort of linear order as far as our process here, but also before you even write the survey, it's knowing who you want to answer for the qualitative. And so you would filter out, if it were for shoppers or the consumers, it would always be over the age of 18, but I don't think we had many other variables there. But for marketers, we always wanted to make sure the marketers included in the survey aligned with the marketers that we were targeting, and or just managed the volume or had the expertise that would give so that their answers were actually accurate and valuable. So I was just thinking about, for the marketers especially, there would be a lot of filters to clarify if they moved forward.
Totally,
and
right.
We often just focused on US because the markets were so different.
Yeah. We tried to filter out like SMB, we were focused on enterprise, Fortune 500 marketers. So there was just questions in place to filter out some of the smaller businesses who might be trying to take the survey.
Yeah. So that's another key point. And then to your point, because of all the different types of data, whether it was like volume related or frequency related, it gave us different types of data sets for the visualizations as well. So I think that just added to the dynamic value of the paper is that it gives different data and different perspectives, and kind of provides different learnings for different people in the audience and different themes. One thing we always ask is, what vertical do people work in? So we could then, carve out things for vertical specific data. The most important things, we've talked a lot about the paper, but for us, it was, especially when we were on a very limited budget, how do we use this, to your point, as a content hub going forward? So I want to talk a bit about some of the great opportunities.
It's so exciting because you're just creating so much content in like one fell swoop, and you can do so much with it. Obviously you walk away with the original research, a full-on paper that's great as a leave behind, it's great as a printed asset. It's something really meaty that shows your expertise. But from there, we would pitch it as a keynote at industry presentations, right? So then it turns into, a speakership and conference content, webinars, right? That was something we always did as we were launching a paper, and it was a key part of our content strategy. We'd host a webinar to walk through the results and findings. But blogs, infographics, right? And I think actually even an infographic may seem like a small asset, but if you consider that you're going to be producing a paper that's probably, a little bit on the longer side, producing an infographic that distills the key highlights and the key stats in a really digestible and visual way actually is an important piece of content. But it can fuel so many different things. Put it in your newsletters, do email blasts around it. even some like non-conventional, I guess use cases come to mind. One year, I think it was the age of Amazon paper at the time. I think it was Search Engine Land had a category in their Landy Awards for best original research. And we were like, hey, we just did this amazing research paper. Let's submit it, right? We hadn't, we weren't proactively looking for awards to submit it to, but, did, and we ended up winning. And after that, it was like
unexpectedly, which is a whole other story.
But I mean, right? It's another opportunity for visibility. People hear about it, they download it. So there's just like, it just gives you such a robust reservoir of content. And I mean, like now I'm getting all excited. I can like keep going.
I know.
Lead gen, obviously, put it on your site, gate it, use it as a lead gen vehicle. I mean, like the other thing, you mentioned at the beginning that not all of the findings and insights make it into the final paper. That doesn't mean you can't use them, right? We always walked away with a deck that had every insight, every graph, right? And, even though maybe we weren't putting all of those on our website, we were using them for pitches. We were using them for presentations. Hey, do we have a stat on this? Do we have a stat on this? Oh, we want to do, a verticalized piece of content on CPG. What do we have from our research that maybe didn't make it into the paper? But yeah, it really can fuel your content for like a year, potentially even over a year.
Yeah, no, and you're so right. So, the most recent one I did was for the affiliate marketing industry. And I used it to get a keynote at a huge conference because I was like, look, I'm launching first to market data.
Yeah.
And actually I lined it so that it launched at the conference.
Perfect.
So the first time anyone was hearing it other than the press and the embargoes was on stage.
Yep.
And that just had such a great effect for the brand that I was working with, but also like a year later, I was just back at the last conference and people were still talking about it. They're still referencing the findings, and like, it was new, it was different. And the comparison between consumer and marketer plus the interviews, the qualitative interviews, make it different than other research papers.
I mean, and I think, from an event perspective, especially, they always want something new, right? They want something and someone on stage that no one has seen yet before. So if you can go to them and say, hey, we have a brand new piece of research, you'll be the first to have it at a conference. It's a really good way to help secure speaking opportunities.
This podcast is brought to you by Break Room Labs. Break Room Lab gummies for energy and focus feature an optimized blend of low caffeine, vitamin B12, and nootropics to refresh your mind and body in as little as 5 minutes. Low sugar, tasty, and convenient. Get 20% off when you visit breakroomlabs.com.
Yeah.
And overall, too, I think one of the last ones you and I did together, we presented as a paid presentation at a Media Post conference. And we were able to take the data into an educational piece, right? Of like, these are, whatever it was, like 4 steps to do this or 5 ways to do that, gave our, POV as the agency to, again, like, to demonstrate how smart we are, you should hire us, but then back it up with the actual research and data points. So again, it makes it so strong. It makes, and I remember even like I was saying with last year, the whole strategy was not just to print a paper, but this will serve as our content hub for the next year.
Yep.
And that's the value. And like, it's just infinite. It really is, like you're saying.
I know,
so many
you can
things
go on forever, right? We didn't even talk about social, or just, 1 year we had a post per week, and it, we were highlighting one of the key stats every week, what it meant. And,
and the partnerships with the speakers, again, like the interviewees, the industry experts, again, not only did that add credibility, but the social posts we would quote them in a graphic, tag
Yeah.
their company. Next thing you know, we're associated with them, like built our credibility. It's just so many valuable aspects to research paper. And again, like I often go in with it as a top line of my recommended, growth strategies. And people are like, wait, what? So hopefully they're all listening to this.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much
and
you
want
can
to
do
hire
with
us
it. Right. And I mean,
to help lead their initiative.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, like we rattled off so many different types of content. People might be thinking like, oh gosh, that sounds like so much work. Like, how am I going to do all that? It's a million different types of content. Like, oh my gosh. But I mean, I think, we got to a point where you have a process, right? There's templates, it's operationalized, right? When the first time you do it, you invest a lot of time in making sure you nail those things. And then in the years to come, it was like, we knew exactly what we were going to do. We had the process. Yes. It was super easy to crank everything out and really get as much juice out of the content as possible. I think too, right. Going to your point around the interviewees and the folks in our qualitative interviews also promoting it, right? That's of course another reason to do qualitative interviews. But I think one of the reasons that, people kept coming back, and one of the reasons why we got good visibility from our partner and interviewee promotion is that we also just tried to make it so easy for them, right? Like give them canned posts, give them custom graphics, tell them what to say, like make it so they don't even have to think, right? They can copy and paste it into LinkedIn. They can send an email to their teams. And it's a nice way to thank them for being involved, and a nice way to make sure that you're getting some additional visibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to start another. I have all the topic ideas in my head of what I want to do next. And one last thing that I think another key of when your research paper has made it is that one of our papers, I was going through Criteo. This was years ago. Criteo had a e-commerce accreditation or certificate you could earn, and they had a tutorial that you would take with questions and answers, and our data was referenced, our research paper and data was referenced in Criteo's training for the Amazon or an e-commerce accreditation. It must have been e-commerce because they wouldn't have been for Criteo. But anyway, so again, you never know where the research is going to show up with your data. Oh, and one other win was last fall, eMarketer's chart of the day came from my the research paper that I spearheaded. So again, and then that lives on, and you can promote it, another PR opportunity. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, if anything's evident, Meghan and I are very passionate about the value of original research as a strategy for essentially business growth strategy, right? It's content, it's lead gen, it's PR, it's awareness, and it's credibility and retention too, because you can share it with your existing clients to demonstrate and provide that value.
I think that's an important point, right? Like retention is so important, and so many clients want to know that they're working with agencies and partners who are leading the market, who have innovative ideas, who have new ways of thinking about things. If you can go to them and provide, new research I've never seen before, it's proves your value as a partner.
Yeah. So, we could go on forever on this topic, but thank you, Meghan, so much. As always, love partnering with you, and hopefully someday soon someone will ask us to spearhead a research paper together again.
Thank you. I know I have the white paper itch now. I'm like, feeling ready.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we can have you back on the podcast again.
Awesome. Thanks, Kerry. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. If you want to learn more about original research and content strategies, visit our website, revenuebasedmarketing.com. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast for more strategies to skyrocket your company growth.